that. It is like everything has a tendril to it.
Yep.
Another one of the things in the document, the defense claiming the prosecution knowingly presented and failed to correct false testimony regarding that white van that was linked to the crime, and that was kind of back and forth for a few days. And you play the timeline, and it's like this doesn't make any sense, but there was no correction of any of it.
It destroys her state's timeline. It
Yeah,
really does.
yeah.
I mean, like unequivocally. I mean, at the end of the day, and I said this on Vinnie Politan the other night, like, and he had me opposite of Gray Hughes, who, for 2 years has been convicting Richard Allen on timelines.
Hmm.
So, and he's always uh, prescribed to the state's timeline. He always felt that was the right timeline. I've always been saying attack the timeline,
Hmm.
attack the timeline. Something is off here. And what this did was completely dismantle the state's theory of how this went down and when it went down. And because remember, the last thing that Nick McClelland said during his closing arguments was that, the girls were the heroes of this horrible story because they were the ones who solved their own case. And it was Libby by taking the video. And then McClellan had decided to lean into this concept that it was Abby that hid the phone as her last act on earth, hid the phone underneath herself, which is where it was found right before she died. And they're locked in on the phone moving for the very last time at 2:32. So they then put on Brad Weber. So they've locked in that time as far as what their theory is. Okay, the phone's done moving, and Abby's the last one to have touched the phone by hiding it underneath her.
Hmm.
So you've got 2:32 is their time of death. Like
Hmm.
that's it. And so what they did is they put Brad Weber on the stand to testify that, oh yeah, I left work and I came straight home. I took the private drive and I parked and then I went inside and I took a nap. And they have him arriving home like at 2:28,
Hmm.
2:29, 2:30, sometime in that time frame. And that's when they use the Walla confession where Alan says that, oh, I saw a van, I got spooked, and I killed the girls.
Yeah.
So that all has to happen before 2:32.
Hmm.
So then when you see this video with the timestamp on it and with a phone ping on his phone at 2:50 p.m. from the house, you know that his van drove by down that private drive at 2:44,
Hmm.
long after Richard Allen would have been able to see it.
Hmm.
Like according to their story, it completely destroys their time. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah.
You can't have it like if you're going to say, okay, well, our time was a little bit off. It no, the phone quit moving at
Yeah.
2:32. You said that Abby put it under her body as her last act on Earth. That's how she solved the case
Hmm.
by hiding her phone so the killer didn't know it was there. You and the biggest problem is the state knew they had that.
Hmm.
This all comes from the state's discovery. That should really disturb people.
It does.
That they
If they're
that
paying
that Nick
attention.
yeah, I mean, is Nick McClelland going to somehow try to come into court? Because look, this thing ends one of two ways. Well, one of three ways. Either Gold denies it without hearing. They have the hearing, which if I'm Nick McClelland and I've got any explanation for why I didn't bring that up at trial,
Hmm.
despite knowing it existed, despite knowing that it completely destroys my timeline and I pretend like it doesn't exist,
Hmm.
or the thing gets remanded. I mean, if I'm Nick McClelland and I've got an excuse, I'm hoping for a hearing
Hmm.
so that I have the opportunity to come in there and say, okay, well, I I missed it. I
Yeah.
didn't see it. Or I mean, like, can you think of an
Something. Yeah.
excuse, T? What excuse if you're Nick
I
McClellan?
think that's all you got. I mean, because it really is one or the other. Either you purposely did not use that because it was an advantage to you, or you missed it and you're basing your story on what you believed, but you just somehow that eluded you. I don't know how you would do that, but people are human. Things can happen. But I think that'd be the only argument you could make.
I mean, and let me ask you this, based on what I've just told you of my evaluation of the state's timeline just being completely blown apart,
Mhm.
can you think of a counter argument to how it's not?
No, I mean it's one of those things that just doesn't lie. You can take the numbers, you can take the time stamps, and okay, well if you're going to claim this, that won't make sense over here, so it has to be this if you're going to say that. It's not rocket science, and it's not like theory or someone's opinion. You can just look at how it was presented, and if what you are saying is what you want to go with, that doesn't add up.
It doesn't.
That, I mean, or maybe they were just too stupid about it and they thought it did. And it took it actually being heard by people outside of their echo chamber for people to go, what the fuck?
Right. I mean, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, I was opposite of Gray Hughes, who's gone through his goddamn timelines on his YouTube channel
Hmm.
10 million times.
Yeah.
Like, oh, this is it. This is how it went down. And like, he just had no response because there is no response to it.
No.
It's like there is no response. The state is locked into that timeline,
Yeah.
locked into it. The phone stopped moving. Abby hid the phone right before she died.
Hmm.
That's it. Like those two things happened at 2:32,
Yeah.
according to the state. And we now know that Brad Weber in the white van doesn't come down that private drive until 2:44.
Hmm.
12 minutes after they're saying all this went down. It's a hugely significant 12 minutes
Yeah.
because it destroys that entire confession by Rick Allen, which they said was the smoking gun because it had facts that only the killer could know.
Yep. Yep.
Like there's no other way it works. Like it just and
No.
if anybody out there has a way to make it work, I'm all ears.
Sure. Yeah. I 100% agree. Uh, the alternate suspect theory, this being brought up. I mean, this has been, it was never brought into court, but this has been, out there in the ether if you're paying attention to the case of Ron Logan. This is where the girls were found on his property. And not a whole lot of investigating done on him. Yeah, they went in and they talked to him. He ends up going to jail for probation violation for a traffic incident. But when you learn more about Ron Logan, you kind of go, okay. And the fact that he allegedly confessed in prison to another inmate. So take that for what it's worth. But the ex of Ron Logan, Connie, right?
Yep.
She's been speaking out quite a bit. She was on Banfield just the other night talking about how this went down in her world when she found out about the girls dying and what was going on before that time with her and Ron. And she talks about him being a horribly abusive, controlling, nuts. But he, there was something about him that she kept going back to. It came to an end. I'm going to say this before it came to an end. There was a moment where they he was selling a horse to a girl down the road, and Connie, the girlfriend at the time, thought he was really kind of being a bit over touchy-feely with the 13-year-old girl. And apparently, he'd ride over there sometimes, and that would still kind of be, and she would just say, this is weird. And they apparently argued about that too. So we didn't see it, so I don't know. I'm just going to take the word of the girlfriend on this. There's a propensity there for children to a touchy-feely extent that probably is not appropriate. And then you add in the fact that he thought it okay to take a crescent wrench and hammer her over the head with it, causing her to have 7 staples put into her head. It kind of shows that Ron's capable of kind of doing anything. Because if you're going to go take a wrench and you're going to go bam somebody on the head with it, you got to kind of assume they might die from that single blow. And I think anybody who kind of has that in them Capable of probably almost anything because that's just not in some people. I mean, unless it's self-defense and it's you're going to die. That's not in most people if your significant other says, "I think we got to break up." Some people are capable, some are not. It's like I think some people are capable of raping people and others are just not. It's not in their system, but if it's in your system, you're capable of a lot of shit. So I think it says a lot about Ron.
Yeah, me too. I mean, like I had heard a lot of stuff about him, but I had not heard about this jailhouse confession.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, you can give that whatever weight you want. And, you can give whatever weight you want to attribute to the fact that this Reese guy,
Hmm.
which I was pronouncing Ricky, but I think it's Reese,
Okay.
that he ultimately at the end of it says, okay, well, I'm not asking for any favors. Like I'm not asking for a reduction or for you to cut some time off my bid here. Like I just want justice for the girls. And I mean, to me, that earns some credibility because typically when you get snitch situations, they're wanting something in return. They want a favor for it, right? So I mean, you have to give it some more weight than you would typically give a snitch's kind of outcry.
Hmm.
And more importantly to me is what was contained within it. And it was more than anything else is the whole box cutter
Yeah.
portion
Yeah.
of
He
it.
talks about a box cutter.
Well, I mean, but like you have to look at this like the box cutter thing was a huge thing at trial where the medical examiner's on the stand and like out of the blue starts talking about he was at his workbench because he had been on record as stating that he had always thought that two different weapons had been used. And the state was like, well, we don't like the two different weapon theory because that makes it seem like it was two different people doing this at least. So, he claims that he has an epiphany at his workbench and he looks down and he sees a box cutter on his workbench. He's like, "Oh my god, that's it. Like that's what the killer used." So he testifies to this at trial, which of course, once again, lines up with this Walla confession. So
Hmm.
you've now got the van and you've now got the box cutter, okay? And you've got Alan confessing to it. So you've got Dr. Core testifying that he believes that it could have been a box cutter and that the strange indentations that were left on one of the wounds came from that handle portion that most box cutters have,
Hmm.
and that was somehow pressed up against the neck while the incision was being made and it left this strange looking wound. And you've now come to realize that this statement by this inmate has been in the state's file for years. Like this thing came, I mean, Ron Logan's long dead.
Hmm.
So this thing came out in 2017, man. Like this thing was sitting in there.
Hmm.
And I don't know who cleared Ron Logan. I don't know that he was ever cleared. I was hearing that Kathy Shank, the woman who magically found Rick Allen's original statement to Dan Doolin, is the one who's not law enforcement, who was retired down in Florida, I think, who had called to volunteer to come help and was putting all the tips into order, putting all the stuff that they were gathering into some kind of usable system,
Hmm.
and that she's the one who cleared Ron Logan, which, if is true, is insane. Like she's in no position to be clearing anybody at all. That concept is
Hmm.
beyond bizarre. I mean, only law enforcement can clear somebody, and that has to be
Yeah.
based on investigation. So you've got this box cutter, which is in existence, which now somehow, when Richard Allen is in prison, is inserted into the case along with Core's testimony about a box cutter. Dude, I could not trust a conviction any less than I trust this conviction.
Yeah.
Like I have no idea if Rick Allen did this or not, but what I know is that that trial was a sham. It was a sham trial, man.
I don't understand really how anyone could see it any other way, unless you're closely connected to the case, and there's emotions involved in your family, and you know you're so drained, you just got to believe they got the right guy because you can't take it anymore. I can understand that. Other
I
than
cannot.
that, if you're looking at it objectively, yeah, there's just so much. I mean, just everything went wrong, and was there's just so many violations of the law, and just how this was all conducted. It's nuts.